Okay, let's jump right in. Picture this in your mind. Literally a cinematic, majestic architecture of the spirit. We're talking about a cascading flow of pure, infinite light pouring from the Ohr Ein Sof, the infinite, straight down into the highest spiritual realm, Atzilut. But here's the catch. As that light descends further down toward the lower realms of Beriah, Yetzirah and Asiyah, it actually hits these brilliant veils. It hits cosmic screens and barriers. So, welcome to today's Explainer, where we are going to exhaustively map out the literal architecture of creation.
Exactly. So today we are mapping out these 4 spiritual worlds, famously known by the acronym ABYA. We've got 6 parts for you. First, Ein Sof to Atzilut. Second, Atzilut, system without screen. Third, firewall, Masach and Parsa. Fourth, Beriah, light through screen. Fifth, Yetzirah and Asiyah, thickening screens. And finally, number 6, multi-gen cosmic engineering.
Section 1. Ein Sof to Atzilut.
So, you might be wondering, how does this infinite light actually begin its descent? Well, before we can even touch on the lower worlds, we have to establish one absolutely unbreakable universal rule. In literally all spiritual worlds, you are going to find 2 things: Atzmut and Kelim. Essence, which is the pure light, and vessels, which are the containers. Now, going step by step, based on our source in Talmud Eser Sefirot, the infinite light first expands, a massive conceptual expansion called Hitpashtut. And here's the fascinating part. As it expands, the light actually thickens. That's called Hitabut ha'or. It's this exact thickening process that creates the Kelim, the 10 foundational vessels of Atzilut. And once those vessels are fully formed, that pure divine essence perfectly clothes itself right inside them.
Right. And to translate that ancient quote for our modern ears, think of Atzmut as the absolute raw source code of reality. But, source code needs hardware to run on, right? The Kelim, the vessels, are that foundational hardware. The infinite light doesn't just crash randomly into existence. It intentionally builds its own hardware through that thickening process you just mentioned, and then it runs its divine operating system perfectly within it.
Section 2. Atzilut, system without screen.
So, Atzilut is completely unique in its architecture. If I were explaining this to, say, my kids, using a video game analogy, I'd tell them Atzilut is the main castle. It is plugged directly into the raw energy source. Inside the world of Atzilut itself, there is 0 internal shields blocking the light. The divine emanation, the Ohr, just flows freely through all 10 of its Sefirot. It's a completely open, unshielded pipeline of pure raw energy.
Section 3. Firewall, Masach and Parsa.
Okay, so as that completely open pipeline of energy reaches the very bottom of Atzilut, specifically at the Sephir of Malchut, it hits a boundary. Which brings up the clarifying question that honestly trips everyone up. When we talk about this boundary, is the Masach a literal physical walls separating these spiritual worlds? Like, are they spatially stacked on top of each other like floors in an office building?
Listen, I am so incredibly glad you asked that, because we have to deliver a very strict warning to our audience right now. Do not, and I mean do not, imagine physical worlds. Do not picture spatial distance or literal brick and mortar walls. In Kabbalah, distance, the concept of Hakaa, strictly means a change in form and a change in the capacity to receive. 2 things are considered far apart spiritually only if their qualities are drastically different. So this wall, it's a conceptual boundary of form, not a physical ceiling.
So, getting down to the mechanics, what actually happens at the Malchut of Atzilut? The text explicitly tells us that when the light's expansion, the Hitpashtut, reaches this final point, the emanators saw that the lower realms simply lacked the capacity to receive this unimaginably intense light. So what happens? A Masach, a withholding screen, and a Parsa, a veil, were established right there. This barrier directly intercepts that intense direct light, entirely preventing it from expanding downwards freely into the lower worlds.
Let's exhaustively break down the mechanics happening at this exact barrier, step by step. The direct light, known as Ohr Yashar, flows down and literally strikes the Masach. Because the Masach acts as a strict boundary, a gvul, it completely stops the light from just passing through. This intense collision is called Zivug de Hakaa, a striking union. The light then bounces back up as Ohr Hozer, returning light. Now, a quick aside here, you might hear other concepts discussed in Kabbalah circles, things like a shalon, which is a window,
or a nekiv tsar, a narrow hole letting light trickle through, but I want us to be exceptionally precise today. Those specific mechanisms are not explicit in the source text we are studying today in Part 3. What is absolutely explicit is that the light strikes the screen, there's a union, and only a severely diminished illumination is allowed to pass through.
Section 4. Light through screen.
So how does light even enter the lower realms if there's this massive screen in the way? To really grasp this, let's use a cosmic engineering analogy. If Atzilut is the primary operating system running the direct raw signal, then the Masach at the bottom of Atzilut is the ultimate cosmic firewall. It filters the data flow. Beriah, which is the second stage here, is the first downstream environment. It has to operate behind that firewall, safely receiving a filtered, dimmed-down signal so its system doesn't just crash from a massive overload.
Exactly. The source explicitly tells us that Beriah only receives this diminished, heavily filtered offspring of light, what's called a tolda. It happens exclusively through that striking union, that Zivug to Hakaa on the Masach. Sparks of light pass through and generate the 10 Sefirot of Beriah. But, and this is huge, this light is fundamentally separated from the raw chokhmah, the raw wisdom of Atzilut. The Masach at this level is totally opaque to chokhmah. It only lets through the diminished light of Binah.
Section 5. Yetzirah and Asiyah. Thickening screens.
Now, as we dive into the furthest descent, going down into the lowest two worlds, the pattern repeats itself, but the concealment gets exponentially heavier. The rule here is almost mathematical in its precision. Watch this. Beriah is separated from the direct source by one screen, which diminishes the light down to the level of Binah. To get to the next world, Yetzirah, a second screen is added at the very bottom of Beriah, diminishing the light even further to the level of Ziranpin. And finally, to reach Asiyah, the spiritual root of our world, a third screen is added, leaving only the significantly reduced light of Malchut. Each lower world is exponentially more distant, by form, requiring thicker and thicker screens to aggressively conceal the light, simply so the lower vessels have the capacity to survive it.
And check this out. Notice how the text actually maps this entire intricate structure directly to the 4 letters of the divine name, the Tetragrammaton. It is flawless. Atzilut aligns perfectly with the Yud, the level of Chokhmah. Beriah is the upper Hey, receiving only Binah. Yetzirah is the Vav, receiving Ziranpin. And Asiyah, our world's root, is the final Hey, receiving the heavily screened light of Malchut. It's an absolutely perfect structural sequence of 4 bitshinot, 4 phases, determining exactly how the 10 vessels in every single world operate.
Section 6. Multi-gen cosmic engineering. All right, let's bring all these incredibly precise mechanics into a unified modern summary. Because honestly, whether you are a 10-year-old kid or a senior network architect, you are looking at a system of profound, mind-blowing cosmic engineering. If we go back to that kid-friendly video game version, Atzilut is the main hub right near the ultimate energy source. The lower zones, Beriah, Yetzirah, and Asiyah, which we often just call BYA, are gameplay zones, where heavy shields have to reduce the raw power, because if they didn't, the player's avatar would literally disintegrate on the spot.
Right, for sure.
And for the adults listening, think of a massive enterprise cloud IT infrastructure. Atzilut is that primary operating layer, receiving the direct, unthrottled signal. The Masach at Malchut acts as a heavy-duty firewall gateway. So the lower worlds of BYA, they are just downstream terminal environments. They securely receive a heavily filtered, drastically reduced signal packet, the exact size of data that they actually have the bandwidth to process.
So the most absolutely crucial point we have to step back and just be in complete awe of is this. These screens, these masosachim, they aren't punishments. They are acts of ultimate mercy.
Absolutely. Without that firewall, the downstream servers would literally melt. The screens are what create the boundaries necessary for distinct, finite existence to even occur. The descent of the divine signal is just perfectly, flawlessly calibrated to ensure that we have the capacity to receive.
Thank you for joining us for this complete journey through the Pardes. We hope these ancient truths help you and your family improve your own dimensions this week.
If you enjoyed this full chapter deep dive, please like, subscribe, and share which part of the journey touched your soul in the comments.
We'll see you in the next chapter.